And start the meeting is 5:30. Welcome, everybody. As the ranking vice president, we'll go ahead and I'll take over the duties for the meantime until we get sorted out in terms of president and vice president. Let's start off first with the roll call. Ms. Lister?
Okay, Mrs. Bowling. Mr. Munoz. Here. Mrs. Stewart Campbell. Dr. Bonebrake.
Here.
Mrs. Schmidt. Dr. Schumacher. Here. And Mr. Tatum. Here. Thank you.
All right, well, welcome to our new board members officially as part of 501 Board of Education. We're glad to have you aboard. Next duty here on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And who do we have joining us today?
Well, our student that's joining us today, we changed up a little bit and we now have a video because so many of our students are involved in extracurricular activities. So we're going to turn it over and she's going to introduce you to herself, one of our Jardine students.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
We ask for our
with
viewers
liberty and justice.
just to be patient
My name
for
is
just a
Ariel
moment.
Douglas.
This is one of those
Eighth
things
grader
that
at
have in the
Pledge
video,
allegiance.
so give us just a moment. As we get ready to start, Ms. Douglas is a Jardine Middle School and a College Prep Academy scholar. She's actually watching online, and as we started and had so many virtual pledges, we're now able to take every pledge, and students that can join us the day of, they will be with us. Those that are watching online, they still have the opportunity to try this one more time.
One second.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
Back
for
way up
which it stands.
one more time so we can hear all of Miss Douglas's comments and her introduction. And thank you, Mr. Gowan, for taking care of us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My name is Nairiel
That's as
Douglas,
loud as it goes.
eighth grader at Jardine Middle School. This is my second year at College Prep Academy. At College Prep, we do accelerated work, specifically in algebra, math, and computer science. My favorite class right now is definitely science. We're into
All the way
like
back to the front. We're going to try
science.
one more time. And then we might just have to, we've done this before. I think
pledge
we all
allegiance
remember the pledge.
to the
And so we'll
flag
just have to
of the
do
United
the
States of
pledge and
America
lead it.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Make sure the
under
music
God,
is turned off,
indivisible.
and we'll try
I
this
pledge
one more
allegiance to the flag of the
Douglas, we
United
know
States
that you
of
were
America.
likely watching from
the
home,
republic
so be
for which it
patient. And if it doesn't play today, we will most definitely play it at the next meeting.
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My name is Nairiel Douglas. I'm an eighth grader at Jardine Middle School. This is my second year.
Turn it all the way back.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My name is Nairiel Douglas. I'm an eighth grader at Jardine Middle School. This is my second year at College Prep Academy. At College Prep, we do accelerated work, specifically in algebra, math, and computer science. My favorite class right now is definitely science. We're into like space science. I love it. When I get older, I'm kind of leaning towards the medical field. So I think I would like to be a physical therapist. Once I get into high school, we have labs at TCALC, and I will probably be able to join those. I'm looking forward to keeping my good grades up. I'm doing good so far. And the summertime when it's all over.
Well, that is awesome. Did you say, Ms. Anderson, that Dr. Anderson, she's here with us?
I don't believe
Okay.
she is online at this time, which is why we're using the video and the photos for this
Not a
time.
problem. Well, as a general rule, oftentimes they are with us, and so that'll give us a chance to be able to just talk with them. If you have any questions you'd like to know about these wonderful students, that would be your time. But for right now, we'll hold off on that, maybe next time. Yeah. So now that the Pledge of Allegiance is done, next order of business is board nominations for both president and vice president. And right now, what I'm looking for is to entertain a motion to nominate a new board president. We have any nominations? We have yep. Mr. Bowenbrink.
I nominate Mr. Munoz.
Okay, we have a nomination. Is there a second? Okay, all right. Ms. Boley, any discussion on the nomination? No? Okay, all right. We have one nomination. Are there any other nominations?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Ms. Sue Boley for vice president.
We're gonna do, we're gonna take it one step at a time. So we're gonna do just the president first. We'll
Oh.
vote on it
Oh, I thought,
and then we'll do second.
oh,
So,
okay.
all right,
gotcha.
so any other nominations for president? See none? Okay, we'll go ahead and have, turn it over to Ms. Lister to take the vote.
Who made the second on that one?
Mrs. Bowie.
And the vote is open.
And members, you should see that on your screen.
Oh, you bet. Yay.
Mr. Tatum, are you seeing that on your screen?
Yes.
Gotcha.
All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. Now we're looking for a nomination for our new board vice president. Do we have any nominations?
Well, this is going to be a big surprise to everyone, but I would like to nominate Ms. Sue Boley as our vice president.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, are there any more nominations for board vice president? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and have a vote. Ms. Lister.
Yes, the vote is open. My hand. Okay. Thank you. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We have a new president and our vice president. Congratulations. Thank you all. Okay, moving on, our next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
We have a nomination. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Tatum. Any discussion? Okay, all right. Seeing no discussion, we'll go ahead and move to the vote. Ms. Lister?
The vote is open. Thank you. All votes are in. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you all very much. We have our agenda for today. And next thing on the agenda is our school highlights. Dr. Anderson.
Oh, this is our favorite time, and I think we have. Yeah, we do. I think we have law enforcement here with us. We're going to start. Award recognition. Dr. Burke, when I come up to do our proclamation.
Yes, what we're going to do, we're going to recognize our School Board Recognition Month. Again, we want to say congratulations to our school board for the awesome job that they do. So tonight we're going to read this, and it reads, Proclamation of Topeka Unified School District, number 501, School Board Recognition Month, January 2022. Whereas the mission of Topeka Public Schools is to meet the diverse educational needs of all of our children and to empower them to become competent, productive contributors to our community in our ever-changing world. And whereas school board members are committed to children and believe that all children can be successful learners and that the best education is tailored to the individual needs of the child. And whereas school board members work closely with parents, educational professionals, business partners, and other community members to create the educational vision we want for our students. And whereas school board members are responsible for ensuring the structure that provides a solid foundation for our school system. And whereas school board members are strong advocates for public education and are responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public expectation to the district. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Topeka Public Schools Unified School District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim January 2022 as School Board Recognition Month.
Now, we started with that item in part because our board members that were previously serving just left. And so as part of School Board Recognition Month, we recognize them for their past service. And we are recognizing this board for the current service. On your tables, you have in front of you gifts from students, letters from students, cards from students. I believe Highland Park High came in and dropped off some things for our new incoming board members as well, and current members. So just lots of goodies are included. Additionally, this evening, as the board meeting concludes this evening, we'll be having photos and a various number of montage items from past board members who've been on for the ripe old years of 2 years. And for the incoming board members, the few pictures we've been able to catch so far, we just want to thank you for your service and all that you do for us. Now, for our next two areas of highlight, I'm going to stand here. I feel a little small behind. Oh, he's here. Now, his is pre-recorded. I'll just use this one right here. And I'll have him share a little bit about his department. He does have a little pre-recorded message as well for those that are online, because that's going to go out on social media. You were interviewed today, am I right, Chief? Yes, this morning. And so this morning he was interviewed in part because we are the only district in Shawnee County that is partnering with the DA's office to stop sex trafficking. And he is the leader for Topeka Public Schools, who has selected to partner on our behalf and really started a lot of the groundwork. So this interview from the news was in part just due to highlighting the work that he and the DA's office are doing. That's just one example of many things that he's doing, not only for Topeka, but also for the community. So Chief Jeanneret, we're gonna see your video in just a minute. Sure. I'm gonna read the proclamation, and then this proclamation is gonna come on the screen as well, where many of his staff members are joining. We'll show the video, and then if you have questions for Chief Jeanneret, he'll be here to answer those. Are you nervous, Chief Jeanneret?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
All right, so whereas Topeka Public School proudly joins citizens across our nation to celebrate Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, which was founded to thank all law enforcement across the country, and whereas we appreciate the extraordinary sacrifices made by all officers and their families on a daily basis in order to protect our schools, our workplaces, our roadways, and homes. And whereas these officers stand as leaders in educating the community about public safety, and whereas on January 9th, citizens are given the opportunity to show their appreciation to the dedicated members of law enforcement who have answered the call to service, and therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of Unified School District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim January 9th as National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. We so appreciate you, and it's not just Chief Jeanneret, but we also have our TPD partners. So he's just going to share a little bit on the video about Topeka Public Schools, but then he'll answer questions about both TPD and TPS, and then we'll be giving a little law enforcement recognition to some special people within our schools and within our departments. We'll turn it over to the video.
Proclamation of Topeka Unified School District number 501, National Law Enforcement Appreciation. To celebrate National Law Enforcement, we appreciate the extraordinary sacrifice. These officers stand as leaders in educating the community, whereas on January 9th, to the dedicated members of law enforcement who have answered the call to public service. To answer the call to public now, therefore, that the Board of Education of Unified School District number 501, Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim January 9th, 2022 as National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day.
I thought we interviewed you about other things. I'm going to turn it over to our board. And Chief, can you share how many officers we have? Normally, when we're not in a pandemic, they're all here lining the whole room. Normally, when we're not in the pandemic, we get a chance to hear their stories. But can you share who we have and how TPD partners? And then we'll turn it over to our board for questions.
Sure, be happy to. A lot of the officers tonight are at Highland Park right now for the tournament, providing security. And we have, I have one officer here out in the lobby, but with myself, we have 15 officers. And then we contract with TPD for the SROs. There's an SRO at each middle school, so that's 6. And then they have a supervisor, so that's 7. And a lot of my team are retired TPD. Doug's out in the lobby. He's retired from Lawrence PD. There's over 100 years of service, probably with the retired guys that I have on the department. And then we have some new young officers too, so that have been on a few years. That kind of consists of our agency.
You know, I'd love to, we see you all the time, but maybe some of our new members, tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you come to be where you are today?
Well, born and raised in Topeka, graduated from Shawnee Heights High School, started with PD in the 80s, and then rose on up through the ranks to the rank of captain when I retired in 2015. During that time, I got my undergraduate degree in business, and then I had a master's in public administration from KU. And I went to work for the state for a little bit after I retired, kind of teaching and doing law enforcement things, not with a gun, kind of behind a desk. I quickly realized that a duck's a duck. So I had to get back into wearing a uniform. And so Chief Brown, I've known Ron's, a long time on the department, and he had an opening. So I came to work there. And then when he retired, Dr. Anderson and Mr. Robbins were gracious enough to give me a chance to be the chief. So, and it's been a great working relationship. Dr. Anderson and Mr. Robbins are extremely supportive of law enforcement, and anything here in the school district we can do to increase the safety of students, faculty, and staff. So it's great to have that kind of support. And I know you're all supporters too.
Yeah, we definitely absolutely know the important role that you play in our schools and the relationship that you build with our students. Are there other questions among board members?
There was a tremendous response by the officers at Landon. Was it last week when an individual appeared at school with a gun in their backpack? And also when I was in high school, there was at least a skirmish, if not a serious fist fight, before every football and basketball game. And I don't hear of any of that. Is it the presence of the police department, or how do you avoid that in this city?
I think of a lot of it's averted with the relationships that the officers build with the students throughout the school year. Some of the trouble that we have had at the games in the past, it was not really involved students. A couple of incidents involved parents. So, yeah, I think it's just that it's important to build those relationships with students, and then there's occasionally there is an issue at a school or at an event, but it's rare, and we can be thankful for that.
I just want to thank you and your team for your service. When I was doing principal for a day, I got to meet one of your team members over there, and it was very evident of the multiple hats that you guys wear. And he had really amazing relationships with the kids. You know, to be able to watch that was just impressive. So thank you so much for everything that you guys do.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
Other questions? Yeah, Ms. Stewart Campbell.
So first a question and then a comment. So my question is, could you speak to the difference between like an SRO versus TPD in our district?
Well, they actually go through a school resource officer school, and they're just assigned to that assignment by the agency for an SRO capacity in the schools. We, a lot of the officers, some have been through an SRO school, but we are police in the schools. And the role of the SRO and our role is to just build those relationships and forge those relationships with the students, the faculty, and the staff. A lot of times you'll probably walk into school, you'll see a lot of students joking around with the officers, and they go in the office during lunch hours and they just sit and talk, and that's just invaluable.
Yeah, thank you. And so now my comment, the relationships that you build with kids is so important, just building that trust. And I witnessed that. I know I said this last year, but for the sake of our new board members, when I was a teacher at Ross, there was an officer who'd come to my room, and my students were all either immigrants or the children of immigrants. And he said, I really want to come to your room as much as I can and establish that trust with our immigrant community. And they loved him. He'd walk in and they'd be like, so happy to see him. So I know what you all do is really outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Appreciate it. Appreciate
Slowly.
all of you.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm very interested in this new committee that you are on child trafficking. Could you explain a little bit more about that and how it will affect possibly our district?
Sure. District Attorney Kage is committed to combating all types of crime in Shawnee County. He had done some research and observed a group in Colorado that had a human trafficking task force, decided to start one and wanted to get as many members as he could involved in the local community. And then actually there's two agencies that are outside the community, Jefferson County Sheriff and Osage County Sheriff. But the goal is information sharing and resources exchange in any type of these incidents that occur, or we get wind of that or anything, we share the information, pass it along. And it just adds another layer of safety and security for our students, because as you all well know, traffickers don't just traffic adults or try to entice adults, they try to entice minors. So that's what we're trying to prevent, and be at the forefront of that. And if we hear or see anything like that, we can immediately address that.
One more question, and it might be a tag team answer between our Dr. Anderson and you. Are we spending any time, or will we eventually spend some time training teachers on understanding what they're looking for in the classroom? Because I know sometimes students could be trafficked and still be looking like they're living a normal life, like appearing at school. Will there be some training to help our teachers spot such concerns?
Yes, I believe so. This is just in its infancy. So as Mr. Kage takes it further and starts to grow, I'm sure that'll be part of the package is in training and identifying. And the social workers and counselors are great in our school districts. They really talk and work with the kids, and they alert us of anything that they think they need to. And that's another avenue for us too. So it's just a great partnership. Everyone, the more partners you can get and the more resources and information you can share, it's just you can make things safer for everyone, the whole community, not just the school district.
I thank you for that forward looking and keeping our students even more safe. And we appreciate that. I hope you know how much we appreciate you. I try to tell you every time I see you.
She brought me McDonald's one night too.
Got him some dinner at the door. But I, working in the schools and seeing the relationships and, when students have a lot of concern approaching our officers and sharing, I'm worried about this. That's just so rewarding that they feel so comfortable to be able to come to you and that you're protecting our buildings and our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Chief, you may want to stay in the room for just a moment and have a seat right there at the table, since we're still talking about law enforcement right now, and we have some recognitions as we are still in the room. We also want to mention Chief Brian Wheels, who's the Chief of Police of TPD. And again, if it was pre-pandemic, he'd be here. Who is here this evening is Lieutenant Munoz. He's actually online, I believe. And so in addition to the lieutenant, we also have Miss Stacy Schreiner and the Landon Middle School Mental Health Team. At this time, we also have Mrs. Hoffman, who is our middle school supervisor, our lead middle school principal. And so we're all really on here wanting to just acknowledge and celebrate. So we'll start off with turning it over to Ms. Hoffman, representing the middle schools, just saying a few very brief words about why we're here tonight, and as we acknowledge Ms. Schreiner as well as her team. And then Mr. Munoz, will bring him up if he's online with us as well. And we may have some questions for our lieutenant and other members of the team about the Landon events in the last couple of weeks. Ms. Hoffman, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, hello everyone. I just want to take just a few minutes here to commend Ms. Schreiner and her team at Landon for a wonderful job that they did. I think this is about maybe a week and a half ago, where a student created a unsafe environment. It was brought to Ms. Schreiner's attention, but prior to school starting, she acted swiftly, she acted calmly, she notified people, gathered resources, and was able to take care of the situation prior to the school day even starting. I also want to commend Sergeant Green, who's on here, who is the sergeant for the SROs, and I know his team helped a lot with Ms. Schreiner. My SRO went over to Landon and assisted a big part of the day just to be as a extra presence and support for her team. And he had nothing but positive things to say about how the staff and Ms. Schreiner handled the situation. And he said it was like the calmest day ever over there. So kudos to you, Ms. Schreiner, for staying calm, for leading your team with such great leadership, and for keeping all of us in the loop. I had no doubt that you were going to handle it in the best way. So thank you to your team. And I know your mental health team is all on here as well. Just hats off to you. I'm sorry that you had to have that situation, but you were well prepared. You had protocols in place. You had followed district policy, and you did all the right things. So congratulations to your team.
Thank you.
And with that congratulatory remark, and I'm so glad Sergeant Green is on. Lieutenant Munoz, actually, I just got a little note, he couldn't be with us this evening, but with Sergeant Green on, and this being National Law Enforcement Day and having Ms. Schreiner here, for those that are watching that don't know what all of those events were, for the most part, Ms. Schreiner really stepped in and played such a large part in saving lives and protecting students and staff. And by the time I got there, she was smiling and running that building like nothing had ever happened just an hour or two earlier. And so for those that are watching, do know that we did have a student that brought a weapon to school and had plans potentially of harming himself and others. And Ms. Schreiner received information from a student who we've also acknowledged last week and her family. And that student shared information, and immediately Ms. Schreiner intercepted the student before school ever started, before they went to classes. And Sergeant Green came down and assisted, and all matters were resolved before the school day started. So with those congratulations, I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Green regarding any comments he'd like to share. And any congratulatory remarks. And from there, Sergeant Green, there might be a question or two, and then we are going to turn it over to Ms. Schreiner. Ms. Schreiner, is your mental health team on with you tonight, ma'am?
They are. They're all here.
Oh, great. So when he's done, you can have the opportunity to introduce your mental health team members. And Sergeant Green, we'll turn it over to you since you were the first on the scene, sir.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me tonight. I can't really go too in depth into the situation itself. The main thing I just want to share is that Ms. Schreiner and her entire staff did a phenomenal job last Friday and prevented what could have been a horrible thing from happening here in our city and in our school district. And they were all great. And the USD 501 police showed up and helped me, and as well as some of my staff showed up and helped me out a lot. So I just want to once again just say how lucky we are to have the staff in place over there at Landon. It could have been really bad, and it wasn't.
And with that, staff, as he continued to talk, thank you so much, Sergeant Green. We're going to ask Ms. Schreiner, can you introduce us to your staff?
I absolutely can. On with me this evening, I have Jackie Henderson. She is my 6th and 7th grade counselor. She was actually a huge help that day. I called on her immediately when the situation happened. I have Allie Clancy, who is my school psychologist. I have Lydia Spellman, my social worker, and Mark Stratton, my 7th and 8th grade counselor, as well as Jennifer Johnson, who is my special education consulting teacher, who came in and assisted as well. It's an amazing team. I'm very blessed. If I can say something, Dr. Anderson, I've also had very great mentors. I mean, I see Miss Hoffman and Mr. Hare on here, and in addition to district leadership, but I've had great mentors who have been supportive of me, and I reacted the way I did because of the training I've had through the district. So that's appreciated.
Thank you, Ms. Schreiner. With that, we're going to pull up the certificate and put it on the screen and then turn it over to the board for questions. The certificate says it's a life-saving award. Now, for those that are watching, we've also given Ms. Schreiner a plaque and also awarded her, as well as the police department last week with her student. But this award is the life-saving award for Stacy Schreiner for her courage and heroism to protect the safety of others. We also have one for your mental health team. And Ms. Schreiner, this particular one is to the entire mental health team for their courage, heroism to protect the safety of others. In addition to that one, each member of the team that you have specified have one with their name as well, which will be delivered to the school on Friday. We're going to turn this on over to our board members. Chief Sergeant Green, can you share at the end of the day, and I know one of the board members asked me this question, so I shared I was going to kick this off with this question. When events happen in a school, much like what happened at Landon, and perhaps Ms. Schreiner wants to jump in as well, when families are notified at the end of the day, why isn't it that families couldn't be notified right then, or when the student was there, or minutes after they left, or an hour later? Why is there a bit of a delay or a needed delay before we share communication with families as things wrap up? Why do we need to wait for that to occur?
Well, that's kind of a two-part answer. The one part is that if there is not an active threat and nobody's actively in danger, it becomes less of an urgent situation to get information like that out if there is not an active threat, and that threat was stopped before it really even had a chance to become a threat. So that threat was put down before it really became an issue, which allows us the chance to kind of sit back and make sure, not sit back, but kind of ground ourselves and make sure that we have all the proper information and everything is put into place, and everything, we know the whole story and everything we need to know before we tell anything. You don't want to put out partial information. You don't want to put out inaccurate information. You don't want to put out anything until you know for sure what needs to be communicated.
Anderson, you want to go ahead?
All right, now we're gonna test this. Can you now hear me? All right, looks like you put your, oh, there we go. Our apologies, a little technical glitch, my goodness. Not nearly as exciting as some glitches that we've had, but certainly we apologize for those that are watching and listening in for that 5-minute delay. And Sergeant Green, you were concluding and continuing those final comments that when events happen, that they don't wrap up within the hour or so. There's a 2-part piece and it takes time. And when it's not an immediate threat, there's no need to say something at that time. I think you were in the midst of sharing that. Did you want to conclude that comment with why we need to wait to the very end? And then Ms. Schreiner will turn it over to you and let our board members ask some questions. Sergeant Green, I think you're still on mute. We'll make sure we can let you take yourself off mute. There you go.
I'm not sure how much of that got out.
We just missed the last sentence.
Oh, the last really was just that you don't want to put anything out there until you've got all the information and you are sure that you've got all the information right. It just could be more damaging to get out partial truths or untruths or non-truths to get out before you know exactly what you've got to deal with.
Thank you. Which means that it could be 7, 8, 9 o'clock, and you still have an individual you're questioning, preparing to charge, collecting all the information. So for those that are watching and were familiar with that event, while the Landon families were notified that day that there was an event, our delay in part is intentional and in collaboration with the police department. And once they read our statement and approve it, we give it out. And then if we know they're actively still investigating, we wait. So if there's an incident in the future, that will continue to be the process, is to work with our law enforcement and give the information that they feel comfortable with us giving at that time. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Munoz, our board president, to open this up for questions for the Landon team.
All right, thank you. Well, first off, I want to thank all of you who were there, who made sure that safety stayed our top priority. You know, even before a board member, I'm a parent of students, and so knowing that there are individuals who are ready, who have dedicated themselves to knowing, you know, what to do in whatever situation might arise. Having individuals just like you all there gives me, and I'm sure lots of other parents, assurance that our kids, every day we drop them off, that they are in good hands and that their safety is always first and foremost. So thank all of you all for the work that you do. And I might be going out on a limb, but I'm sure that it's not just Landon, that every school has individuals just like yourselves who worry about and prepare for any potential situation that might come about. So thank you all for the work that you do day in, day out to be prepared for things just like this. I'll go ahead and pass it on to anyone who has a question on board. Dr. Schumacher.
Yeah, I was just, I wanted to say thank you again and echo Mr. Munoz's, but also how do you approach the day after with students and parents and staff, and you know, not only the event and the great recovery or the response, but also the recovery and how that may affect others.
Ms. Schreiner, do you want to address that question, or would you like to turn it over to one of your spokespersons on the mental health team?
Well, I will start, and if one of them wants to, I believe that a lot of that just is by the culture we've developed at Landon, and in the district. Very, as Ms. Hoffman said, it was very calm. Many of the staff and students didn't even realize there had been a situation until we informed them at the end of the day. And being able to give them at least the small amount of information that we were, assuring them that safety had been the first priority and had been handled quickly. And then we got our mental health team together, and they were available for the entire week for anyone who reached out.
Other questions? Let's go first off.
While training helps, you did an absolutely amazing job. I don't think an average person would have survived that, being able to walk out and encounter the individual with a loaded weapon. How did you have the wherewithal to be able to do that? I don't understand. That was absolutely amazing and gut-wrenching.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I was just doing my job. I mean, that's what we do every day. That's what we're trained to do. Like I said, from the top down, I've had incredible mentors, incredible training, and it's part of what we do. We stay calm, we handle the situation, we keep our school. I said earlier that Landon is my home, and it's my top priority to keep it safe. And I'm not sure I had time to process anything other than I just need to handle a situation like I would any other situation any day of the week.
I would like to have seen you in the operating room.
Mrs. Schmidt?
I am going to echo what's been said. Thank you so much for your performance and dedication. I know oftentimes training things sometimes get scoffed at because we do them again and again and again, and people don't understand why. And this instance just wraps it up and puts it a pretty little bow on it, why that stuff is important, because you guys did it without even thinking. My question to you is, do you use events like this afterwards? Do you meet and debrief about lessons learned or what you could do differently? Heaven forbid it should ever happen again.
Absolutely. And some of that is on a holding pattern because there's a lot of things we can't discuss yet, as it is an ongoing investigation. But absolutely, I've spent a lot of time with law enforcement talking through things and how it went and what the procedures were and what our protocols are that are active in the entire district, and how they prove positive that it worked, that they work. But absolutely, there's been a lot of debriefing and talking and looking at crisis plans and things like that. So absolutely, very much a learning experience from start to finish. Still ongoing.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Yes, Ms. Stewart Campbell.
Yes. So a question and then a comment. So my question is for the mental health team. You mentioned that you were available if anybody needed to come speak to you. So my question is, were there many students who came to talk to you?
Henderson, can you answer that question?
I didn't have anybody. It was really quiet that day. And the following days, I don't know, I was quarantined that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after that Friday. So I don't know if any students reached out to Mr. Stratton or Ms. Clancy or Ms. Spellman or not.
For the rest of our mental health team, anyone else like to comment on Ms. Stewart Campbell's question? Mr. Stratton?
I had 2 or 3 kids come in over the next few days. I think a lot of them just needed to have a place to talk, but the conversations weren't what I would consider extreme. So I think for the most part, they just needed some reassurance.
Thank you. Ms. Clancy, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I was available, but I really didn't have any students visiting me. It was kind of business as usual when I was there.
So, the interesting thing, there was a statement that we provided the school, and they were able to share in a general way that students were stay safe, and here's some events that happen that you might hear about on the news that may be scary. And so they had that conversation, and then shared mental health was available, and just the level of calm and support and assurance was evident, not only from their answers, but just walking through the building that day, the next day. They are an exceptional team.
And then also my comment. So I know quite a few of the people on the screen, and my daughter is a 7th grader at Landon, and my son attended Landon in grades 6, 7, and 8. So Landon too, for me, like Ms. Schreiner said, it's her home. It is one of my school homes here in TPS. So when I first heard about this, it's terrifying. And the way first of all, I just want to say I'm sorry you had to deal with that. That's extremely stressful. And I cannot thank you enough for how you handled everything, from the student who shared with her father, that student's family for raising her so well to do the right thing by notifying adults, and Ms. Schreiner's calm and swift actions, and Sergeant Green and the mental health team, and what you all did potentially saved my child's life. So it's true. So it could have been a terrible tragedy, and you all are amazing, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Thank all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Schreiner, the mental health team, to our Sergeant Green, and all others that are on the screen for all that you do every day in service to students. That does conclude our highlights. Mr. Munoz.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Anderson. Ms. Lisher, do we have any public comments?
Yes, we do. You have them on the table there. So 2. One is virtual on Zoom, and the other is, I believe Mr. Gibson, Jeremy Gibson is here.
Let's start off with the virtual one. That is, I'm looking for the name here.
Chris Jones, I highlighted it.
Okay, there it is. Mr. Jones, are you with us today?
Did he join?
We are looking for him in just a second. There he is. Okay. Mr. Jones, a couple of things I'm going to read to you before you go ahead and share with us your comments. Please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes to address the board. We ask that your remarks to the board be respectful. If you should have a complaint against a specific employee, we ask that you submit your written complaint to the superintendent. If the complaint is against the superintendent, please address your written comment to either me as board president or to the clerk of the board. Thank you so much. And we have 3 minutes. Is that right? Okay.
I want to make sure that you can take yourself off mute, or that we help you take the screen off mute. Looks like you're unable to do that. We're going to make sure that occurs. The 3 minutes hasn't started yet, sir. Okay.
Hello, I'm now off mute. Thank you. My name is Chris Jones, and I live in Topeka. My address is 1501 Southwest Jewell Avenue. My daughter goes to Whitson Elementary, and my son attends Robinson Middle School. My family moved to Topeka 5 years ago, in part because of Dr. Anderson and her reputation as an administrator. So I've heard that the Kansas legislature is possibly going to be taking up a bill that would ban the teaching of certain topics like the full history of slavery, Jim Crow laws, white supremacy, and police brutality against Black Americans. And I just want to be on record to say that I oppose this move. Kansas children should not be shielded from the truth because politicians with re-election agendas have taken curricular decisions out of the hands of teachers, administrators, and school boards. My wife and I love the United States of America. This is our home. We are proud Americans and proud Kansans. And for these very reasons, we want to make sure that our children grow up knowing the truth about American history, about its roots in the enslavement and degradation of Black people and in the genocide of American Indians, and also about its continual and ongoing work to live up to its founding promises of freedom and liberty for all. Our children are white. We do not believe that they will feel ashamed or be harmed by learning the truth about American history. Instead, they should feel proud of their country and they should feel motivated to join the work of making it better for all of its citizens. I ask the board to oppose any move by the legislature to take curricular decisions out of the hands of local school boards and school districts. Thank you.
Jones, thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. Next is Mr. Gibson. Are you there with in person? Okay. Mr. Gibson, you've heard us before, but I'll read it again just to make sure. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes to address the board. We ask that your remarks to the board be respectful. If you should have a complaint against a specific employee, we ask that you submit your written complaint to the superintendent. If the complaint is against the superintendent, please address your written comment either to me as board president or to the clerk of the board. Thank you so much.
I'm pulling off of speaking at this time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lister, there are no more public comments. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Well, before we move on, I want to take a moment of silence. We are a family here, and since our last board meeting, we have lost somebody who's couple of individuals who have been very close, and I want to make sure and first off highlight that and have a moment of silence in honor of their loss here. First off is Alexander Cervantes, who was a second grader at Jardine Elementary who passed in a house fire last week. Sure, as many of us as parents, it is unimaginable. And the second individual we want to highlight is Michael Runau, who is a paraprofessional here with 501 at McClure Elementary and had passed not too long ago from cancer. So I'd like to ask you all to join me in a moment of silence. Thank you all. And now moving on, the next item on our agenda is business by consent. I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the items of business by consent as presented and authorize the board president or superintendent to sign the special projects, purchasing contracts for and on behalf of our board.
Do we have a second to Ms. Bowley? Okay, a second, Ms. Stewart Campbell. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, we'll go ahead and turn it to a vote. Ms. Lister.
The vote is open. Thank you. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Next on our agenda is the superintendent's report.
Thank you. The first item, which is one item we've been keeping on the agenda. And Dr. Gray, thank you so much in advance. Can you move the podium back over for us? Thank you. I just have an amazing team. As he shifts that off to the side, I know I'm quite tall, but apparently I'm not tall enough to be able to see Ms. Schmidt and Ms. Stewart Campbell. So I feel so distant with that podium in between me and talking directly to you. So we always give you a COVID update. We're going to give you not only the COVID update, but share a little bit about some a system we also have put in place. If you've looked at the county scorecard, we're going to go to the webpage. For those that are viewing, that way they can join us in looking at the webpage. Our webpage, and we're just going to remind people where that COVID scorecard is. If you go to the main webpage, you'll see TPS resources, parent resources, and when you click on there, it's going to show the Shawnee County scorecard, which is at just about the highest point of red. But any part of red can be scary, and it means it's a substantial spread. And that county scorecard also really begins to parallel what schools will see if they're not seeing this yet. So for us, on our scorecard, and we're going to go to the very main front page. If you're new to Topeka, this will help you navigate this. You probably already know where this is. You probably already look at this. So right under the photo of the Capitol, we're going to go back up to where that Capitol picture is, and there's some links, the quick links that are right there, and TPS resources, which is the second link. When we click on that, and you go down on those TPS resources, for those that are watching, at the very bottom, you'll see first the Shawnee County one, which is right there, and it shows the numbers for last week. So we parallel that and we show our numbers. So right below that, you now see our scorecard. We are below 5%, but well above 1%. Generally, for our board members, we're 1% or below in terms of the spread within our district. Now, since we do have 2,500 staff and over 13,000 students, while that may not seem as high as it could be, it is still quite concerning because those aren't numbers that we tend to experience within our schools. Now, remember last year we closed around this time, and so we really didn't have that January full look at what things could look like when we're in the red. And of course, there were not vaccinations. So my question was, in part, where are most of these numbers coming from? Ms. Vada, our nurse coordinator, shared many of these are from household contacts, people that are at home and their parents are positive and they have to stay home. And often students realize they're positive shortly after 2 or 3 or 4 days later, they realize they're positive. So I share that for a reason with you regarding some continued navigating this system. So with that scorecard, we're going to go back to the main webpage. KDHE this past week gave new guidelines that starting with testing, that as the testing supply kits continue to be given out, and those may be smaller in number in the future, the testing suggestion and guidance is that there's testing on the first day of exposure and then between day 5 and 7. They also shared that they no longer have the capacity to do contact tracing. So they are expecting families to tell whomever they expose that they expose them. For Topeka Public Schools, we do feel we have a duty to inform those that had close contacts within our schools. However, our nurses are certainly full to capacity with COVID-related matters. From what they're sharing with me as I've held advisory group meetings with a small group of our roving nurses and our nurse coordinator and some of our principals, are that phone calls are coming in so frequently, and it takes a good 30 minutes to get all the information that you need on when you were exposed, how were you exposed, do you have other siblings, what schools do they go to, that the nurses are not having the time they need to address immunizations, daily kinds of illnesses, asthma treatments, diabetes treatments, and all the other things that they would normally do. So it's creating quite the challenge. So we have this opportunity to not do any contact tracing. We have the opportunity, should we want to take it from what the guidelines have now been revised to, we have the opportunity to change some of our practices. So here's what we are currently doing now and what we'd like to continue to do in the future, and we will assess moving from there. So on the main webpage, now that we're back there, we, in the last 24 hours, created reporting COVID-19 exposure. It's a helpline. If you recall, 2 years ago when we went into this, we created a helpline and had it manned by my communication specialist who serves as my clerical support. She was the helpline individual. And the rollover calls went to technology if we couldn't manage all the calls that came here. So we already have a number that has the letters HELP at the end. And so that phone number is now being resurrected, and it now goes back to my communication specialist, who is my clerical person, but also to a nurse who part-time as of today will spend time in central office. This nurse was newly hired. So last week we have been continuously recruiting, trying to put a COVID testing nurse at each school. Nurses are hard to come by. We were fortunate that we hired 3 people last week, but those 3 people filled some of the vacancies that we had currently. Some of them are additional nurses, such as one started yesterday at Topeka High as a second nurse. Another started at Topeka West. The young lady today started here half-time, and she'll be at Quincy half-time. So we're placing them in places where we can put 2 nurses, but we're also filling the vacancies. So here's what you can expect. Parents should have received an email this evening. This reporting COVID-19 exposure, the letter above and the letter parents received, and you're fine right where you are, Mr. Gowan, pretty much tells parents that if they had an exposure of any kind, they can self-report on this link. Everything nurses ask them is on this document. We're going to go to one of these documents. Can you click on any one of the schools? Each school has a different link, because when they fill out the document, it goes straight to a Google form that the principal and the nurse will see. This should remove the paperwork from the nurse from having to spend 30 minutes per phone call for 50 or however many families that they've been talking to on any given day. And so now that they fill this out, this means if you were to call the school today to say I was exposed or my child is exposed, the school's going to tell you, please complete the self-reporting form. It's located on our main webpage. One click, they can fill this out. Upon filling this out, this now fills out a spreadsheet. It informs the principal and the nurse of all the details. The young lady, Miss Debbie Shaw, that now works here half-time, she was with us last semester through a vendor agency. You may remember we had a vendor partnership with a few nurses. So she thought we were so wonderful, she left that vendor and came to work for us, thanks to Mr. Robbins' skillful recruiting. So Miss Shaw, she will then assign the quarantine, because that was shifted to nurses months ago from the county health department because they could not manage the quarantine. So she will then let them know when they can return to school. And if there are other individuals that are close contacts, the school is still giving letters if you are a close contact, informing you are a close contact. Now, regarding testing, because many of the students who are positive are household contacts, we do have concern that if you test someone on the first day of exposure and don't test them again to between 5 to 7 days, they could be positive on day 2 or 3 or 4, which is what we tend to find. So for household contacts, we will let them know that if they've been exposed, and again, we are also limited in our testing supplies, but we're going to use them until we don't have testing supplies anymore from KDHE. But if you're exposed, that we will, if you're a household contact, you will test on between day 5 and 7. So you will need to stay home and to make sure you don't have symptoms. But if you're asymptomatic, you can come back after that, week or so at home, and between day 5 and 7, you can come on back. Normally you'd stay home 10 days. Now, some parents refuse to test, don't want to test. They would stay home the 10 days. If they have been exposed, that will be the normal quarantine time. So that's how we're handling household exposures. Close contacts, which could be something like you were a student eating lunch and you were exposed because you were sitting next to someone. Very few of our positives are from close contacts. They're not really happening from those kinds of things. Or you were close contact to someone in the community. You're tested on the day of exposure, and then you are tested again between day 5 and 7. And so those close contacts would still be able to attend school. that is the only way at this time that we think we might be able to manage using this form. Now, if we're overwhelmed and have more than what we can handle with a part-time nurse and my clerical person now supporting Mrs. Vada, our nurse coordinator, then we might have to adjust. But for now, we think this temporary adjustment would allow us to still inform close contacts, still have parents do the reporting, and allow us to still give parents immediate responses. If they don't have the internet, we have a 1-800 kind of help number. They will receive that. And that is on the form, and it was on the email this evening. Now, I just shared a whole lot there. I would encourage the board that some time ago, back in November, board members had some conversation regarding other districts that may have been giving snow days off during a particular week. I believe it was the holiday week of Thanksgiving. COVID spread was not as bad then as it is now. So if that is, if the concern continues to rise regarding staff being challenged and us needing to give some level of snow day allowance, do keep in mind, and that snow day allowance potentially being for all of our staff. And for any one of those days being a day to further sterilize every building during that break, do keep in mind that the next time period in which students have off is during the parent conference week, where there is a day in which students, Wednesday, they would normally come for parent conference. And then that Thursday and Friday would be off. So that would be Monday through Wednesday would be the days that if you were to do something during this February or January and give families enough notice, that would be the time frame that you'd want to entertain, should you want to entertain that option of this time. If you recall last time, the time frame was too short, as it was discussed by a board member, questioned, the possibility, and the time frame just was not enough time to really plan for that. And at that time, again, the spread wasn't as high. So if that's going to be considered, that would be the time frame we would suggest. I'll stop here and answer any questions you have about COVID updates, and then we'll go right into some items on the board retreat.
Mr. Tatum.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Anderson, first of all, I want to say kudos to you and your team for creating rather novel approaches to the reporting system related to COVID-19. I think the hotline and the online resources are commendable. It's really impressive how you guys managed to create a workaround for what would have been the standard method of having a nurse on the phone answering all the calls that would have come in from parents. Having recently visited several of the schools here in the district, I didn't really see a lot of evidence. It wasn't apparent to me that any of the particular schools that I was at were dealing with major outbreaks of COVID-19. And I'm looking on the positive case scorecard, and with the percentages of positive cases that we have, I'm curious, are there certain hot spots around the district? Are there some schools that are having a lot of issues with positive cases, and that's where the numbers are coming from, whereas other schools are not having those same kinds of challenges right now?
Well, the overall, there are no clusters. So we always mention, are there clusters in particular places? But I will tell you that, primarily across the district, when you think about 400 students and you think about 30 schools or 29 schools spread across those, there's a bit of an even spread as it relates to students. But for the most part, most of our schools are elementary. So some of our elementary students, particularly after any break, they don't return and they'll call in. Those are particular issues, as well as some staff in some buildings. And so we're certainly seeing some buildings having more staff and students, but clusters have not been identified by the health department at any one of our schools. So we're fortunate in that regard. Of course, the larger the school, generally, the larger the issue. However, Topeka High doesn't have nearly the level of spread that any school would have, and that was the case last year as well. So, so again, school by school, I'd have to say that it's a bit of a sprinkling across the district. But there are certainly some schools with more staff and students that are impacted than others.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Bowley?
I know our board has asked for specific testing, particularly for test to learn, test to play, and positive testing. And so could you kind of explain to us the workload that the nurses have and how that's being divided, or if it's being divided, and how that is occurring for our district?
Well, for this semester, for test to learn, play, or test to know, any three of those, because the spread is so high, it's not manageable to be able to test everyone in the building, because that's what that means. You're going to do test to learn, know, you just want to know if you have COVID or not. That means anybody can be tested. Therefore, long lines of people potentially, which has happened, may line up for testing. And now that testing supplies are not, are something that we are making sure that we have enough of, and KDHE has been quite generous in continuing to send us those. But as we continue to work through this process, their guidance in being real careful with how many tests we are using at any given time, we are now really taking heed to their guidance with the first day and that between 5 to 7 days. So they're unable to give us enough tests based on their guidance to test every day. So that challenge it will be alleviated because it's the first day between 5 to 7 days. Those that have the COVID testing nurses through our grant with KDHE, they have someone they're testing. If you don't have a COVID testing nurse, it could be a challenge. And so they're managing things in a variety of ways. As an example, at Chase and State Street this past week, they had a line of students that either wanted to be tested or were there for test to know or learn at State Street, not at Chase. But Chase figured out ways to have kind of an isolation space. And then if they came in for testing, they all went to one space, they were tested at the same time, and then they went on to class or they went home. She went over to State Street, and State Street revised their process accordingly, and they were able to do testing and conclude it before 9 a.m. for any family that wanted testing. So they've been adjusting, but it is quite a challenge. Here's one of the greatest challenges: the paperwork. So when all of this was shifted to Topeka Public Schools, it's also has shifted all of the paperwork that the county health department used to do, which are several sheets that go to KDHE or the county. That's a lot of paperwork. But through this new method, the spreadsheet should collect it all. We should be able to export it, send it in, and it should relieve a lot of pressure from a lot of people. So testing will still occur, but it is quite a challenge.
I appreciate that situation of being able to change this up, because I know our board has asked for that test to play, test to learn. And so we had no idea that this new variant would create so much pressure on testing. With this new website, and people are able to put this information in, will we be able to detect clusters in our buildings? And if so, we haven't had this happen yet because our numbers have been so excellent all year long. And even now, compared to other schools, our numbers are still very good. Are we able to figure out those clusters? And if so, will we close down buildings or classes or the district? I know some other districts have, like put classrooms on remote for like 5 days or whatever. What does that look like for our district?
So the KDHE and the county require for us to submit and turn in all of our numbers, which is what my communication specialist, Ms. Nordic, does now for Ms. Vodder all day. So they tell us if we have a cluster.
Okay.
They also receive the test from people who get them in the community. And that's how they can detect, where did it start? which is why one of the questions we ask when we're testing in particular, we note where they were exposed, or where they think they were exposed. So they would inform us. We have not had a cluster thus far, but should we have any cluster that they have identified as a cluster space, meaning that it's spreading in that space and it's identified to have spread within that school, and it's coming from that space, then we would cross that bridge based on the situation. For example, is it a particular grade level? Is it one particular school? So I think having the what will we do if, there's so many ifs that it's really hard to say we would close the school or the district. I think our main approach is to be as proactive as possible. The forms, the cleaning, if we're going to give people an added time off just because they are truly stretched to the max, then that perhaps one of those days will be used to further sterilize, so I think staying proactive is our best effort. But should we have to address a cluster, it depends on where it is and how many people it's impacting. And then what my role would be for you is to then inform the board in advance, here's what's occurring either by phone call or email. And here's what we're looking at doing, starting with the board president and vice president, to make sure that if there's not a board meeting where you can vote on it or we can talk about it, you at least I have conversation with each of you to make sure you're comfortable with some of that direction, unless it's time sensitive. If it's time sensitive, I call the board president and vice president and make sure that you all inform individuals and help let me know what you're comfortable with.
Thank you. I appreciate all the forethought going into our situation. Sure wish it weren't happening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Other questions? Dr. Schumacher?
Yeah, I think if allowed, I'd have a comment and then a couple questions. I think I'm proud of our district and the administration and the school board members that were here before me and what they've done with COVID. Being a pediatrician and a healthcare provider the last 2 years has been very hard. And I have felt comfortable every day my kids go to school. I felt comfortable with them at school. And I think that continuing to try and do some sort of contact tracing is part of that. I think it's hard because the numbers are so high, but I think for us to continue to keep kids in school, which I think is each one of ours ultimate goal, I think it's important. And so I want to say thank you to everybody. I have two questions. One that's a little bit easier. So as a pediatrician that's calling parents daily and telling their kids have COVID, I generally say, call the school nurse. So if and that's without, I don't always know what district they're in. If that mom that I tell to call the school nurse calls the school nurse for McClure Elementary, well, how are they then directed? Are they then directed to the website?
And so they'll be directed to the website, and the website also says, and here's a few of other questions.
Okay.
If they just need to say, my kid's positive, they can fill out the form, and then that same day she's emailing them back. Here's when your child can return a few of other questions. Here's my number, which is the 1-800-HELP type number.
I think my other, so that was my easy one. The harder one, I think, I know in my, other professional life, staffing has been hard. So we're a little bit probably jealous at the hospital that you got 3 nurses. But I know that with the school districts, let's say in Kansas City, staffing is a big reason that they've had to close for days. And is that a concern for our district at this time with these types of numbers, or it's hard for me to gauge like what that critical point is from a staffing perspective.
So we have been challenged. I have to say our staff has been exceptional in covering absences. I'm going to ask Mr. Robbins if he wants to add to this, but I'll give you on average, a school may have anywhere, and generally school staffs have about 50 people on staff, just generally speaking. Unless you're Topeka High. But just about everybody else has about 50 people on staff. I don't believe we've had many, if any. I don't believe we've had many or if any schools. He was just making sure I was awake. I am wide awake because he did not see my Dr. Pepper, and that's okay. So, many of I don't believe we've had at least in the last several days. We look at those numbers every day, and generally it may range from 1 or 2 teachers out, not just teachers, staff, to we've had schools that have had 13 out on one given day. So if you're one school with 13 staff members, now that could be 4 or 5 classified staff or cafeteria or custodial staff mixed in with teachers. So the teachers have been extraordinary with covering each other's classrooms. We have had some schools that have had, multiple groups out at one particular building, and it is a challenge. It really has been. It's been remarkable that we've been able to manage that and continue. Last week, we did have the virtual fair. We thank KSDE for allowing some flexibility. And people were afraid high school students would come and start wanting the sub. We now will use this as a new step. I just thought, well, what if we just put a link out there and send it to all the churches and make this virtual fair one that people can sign themselves up to? You could just sign yourself up. You don't have to wait and call us, and you don't even have to apply first. You can just say, I want to interview. We ended up with about 50, 60 people that signed up for interviews. These, I think just about all of them were people that have certificates, just maybe didn't have the 60 hours, had maybe 50 hours, just a variety of individuals, retired military, it was incredible. So we hired a number of people in the past week. So this week, there were several days that we still had unfilled absences, and there could be up to 60 to 90 unfilled absences. But so we still had but across the 30 schools. So just know that that's an issue. So we still had some unfilled absences, but with that many new subs, we anticipate that we still can manage certainly this week and the weeks to come. But I think our staff definitely, they're stretched. And one area that is a challenge where we didn't get any applicants and we generally don't, the buses. So even today, buses were very late at some of our schools because there were several bus drivers that didn't show up and they don't have subs and other people. So students just have to wait. It's very cold today. So, Mr. Robbins, do you want to add to that, sir?
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Just that, Dr. Anderson is right. And that is, we really have to commend our staff and particularly our administrators at our respective buildings, because they have really been pushing through what has been a pretty challenging time when it comes to staffing. Some buildings have been in worse shape than others. But as Dr. Anderson mentioned, we, with jobs that either don't require a sub or jobs where the building staff has pitched in to help cover vacancies, we have ended up these last couple of days with probably having 63 to 65 jobs that we classified as totally unfilled in the certified ranks, so that being the teaching ranks. One of the numbers that I track is total absences. When you look at total absences, again, this past week, it has been comparable to what we experience as a district on many Fridays. Okay, Friday is a bad day for us as far as absenteeism is concerned. And I would say that that's about what we're running on a daily basis now. Okay. But it isn't a road that we haven't been down previously.
So when he says comparable, we looked at 2019 pre-pandemic and 2020. But again, that Friday number, having that every day, it certainly can be a challenge. And that certified number would include principals, anyone with a certified license, principals, teachers, instructional coaches, all of those would be lumped into that certified number as well. And some buildings, principals are in classrooms at HPC, principals in the classroom pretty regularly when a teacher had to be out, not for COVID, but just for loss of a family member, just being able to cover all of those spaces. So as we've hired these subs, we've placed some of the subs just at buildings that we know always have a vacancy because of the size of the building and just putting them there. And then we have building subs that were already there. So we're trying to be strategic so that we proactively know you're going to have an absence tomorrow, just because that's the way it's been working all year for you. And we'll continue to navigate. Any other questions for us about COVID?
Ms. Willie.
So I'm just confused by the cluster piece. So we send our information into the health department and they take that information, and of course, it's new information, but from the nurses. And that says, even though my classroom only has 10 kids in it right now, 10 students, that classroom's not a cluster because the information is saying that the students have been in contact with somebody else outside of school. Is that what that
And
looks
let me
like?
see if Mrs. Votter is on to explain what cluster means as well. I trust she's probably on. Ms. Votter? And I'll reference the question, Mr. Gallen. Is Ms. Votter on with us? All right. So I'll turn it over to her. Ms. Votter, I'm assuming you heard the question about clusters. And what does a cluster mean in terms of when a cluster is identified? You have a nice smile on there, Ms. Votter, with the yellow in the background.
Thank you. Thank you and good evening. So the health department defines a cluster now as 25% or more of a classroom or a building population testing positive or having symptoms. And as of yet, we have not met that mark district-wide. So we watch for those things as well as we report the number of cases to the county. I look those things over and we have not reached that number. So I think that's a large part because of all the mitigating factors that we have in place and everything that we've been doing all along. So that is right now the benchmark for being a cluster.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that is a district mark or classroom mark or building mark or all three?
It could be any of the above: classroom, building, district level.
Thank you for what you've been doing since we've come back from the winter break. It has been a storm of all kinds of events that we could think of. And I appreciate you and all of your staff for what is happening and how you have stood your ground and done your best for students, even though it's been so difficult. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that.
And Mr. Munoz, we do have a second item on the agenda, but are there any other questions regarding COVID before we move to that second
I do
item?
have just a couple more, one comment and then one more question. One comment would be that, we want to encourage family members, parents and adults of our students to report that. And I'm sure you've already thought about this, but making sure it's in Spanish for those
Spanish,
families who have that. I'm sure you're on top of it. Second thing is you mentioned that we might consider in the future here in a couple of weeks for parent-teacher conferences to perhaps use some of those days as snow days. And my question is, what are the factors that we might consider if we do go forward with that idea? And what might the timeline be where we need to make that decision, yes or no?
The next board meeting, can our board clerk confirm what the date is for the next board meeting, February the 3rd? And so, the earlier parents know, the sooner they can get childcare. So if that was something that was the will of the board this evening and you made that decision, we'd let them know. And they know well in advance. But at latest, that next board meeting would be a good time to make that decision if you are choosing to make that decision, because it would still only give them 2 weeks or so for childcare. Mrs. Walsh, can you confirm the parent conference dates for us? Is your speaker on?
The week of February 14th.
Parent-teacher conferences are the week of February 14th. So they would start the evening of Wednesday, the 16th, and then all day on Thursday, the 17th.
You asked regarding what are areas to think about. I only bring this up because I had the question previously, and it came from the board to say, have we thought about this? So my question back was, have you all thought about this? Since this was a question to me presented, and I think you all talked about it, and the decision at that time was there wasn't enough time. And the more that you thought about it, it just wasn't a lot of time. So if that question came up again, then prior to it coming up, I just want to bring it up now, that if that's a desire, that's something to be talked about now. Things that, and then in November, at least some of the issues were just teachers were taxed and it was challenging and people were having a hard time filling classrooms. The same things we're dealing with now. It's just worse now, I think, than it was even in November. Teachers are, not just teachers, all of the staff, I think they are quite challenged. You know, as well as the challenge for buses and staffing, all of those things remain. I think, and I don't want to speak fully for Mr. Robbins, but I know in talking with Mr. Robbins, one of the things that he feels and we both feel is that if we were to give staff an opportunity, this just wouldn't be teaching staff. It's staff, all staff being treated equally in that space. Because, you know, when we have snow days, custodians and other people still come in, food service a lot of times. So we'd have to think in advance. We'd also have to think in advance, is there something we're doing the week prior for some sack lunch opportunities or something like that? So we'd have to think about that and plan. But just putting that out there so that it's a discussion that you have in advance, if that's a desire moving forward. That particular week is the next week. And then of course, the month after, it is projected that things will get better and that the COVID scorecard will change from what we're being told in the meetings that we're having with health officials. So, but it may get a little worse before it gets better. So in February, it's anticipated we'll still have challenge. And then in March, things might improve. And of course, we have spring break during that time.
Any question? Yeah, Ms. Bowley.
Is it possible for us to just give a letter on our website that these are some of our possibilities that could happen? I mean, I know we have to be very careful on how we word that, but to give parents a fair warning to speak with their daycare to say, this could happen, like a cluster in our building or a classroom that we will need daycare. I think I've read on other websites that districts have warned their parents, this is
if you think you're at the point, if you think you're at the point that you're going to close, then yes, at this point, our staffing, as Mr. Robbins shared on Fridays, the numbers we have now are Fridays every day. So if it's regarding clusters and those sorts of matters, we probably wouldn't give, we wouldn't, you know, frighten families at this point, knowing that we've been able to make it through this point. If the board decides you may give serious consideration to that being out of school date, the earlier you decide that, I think that's a great time to share it. If you would prefer for us to send something saying you're giving consideration, we certainly can give a letter. I think it would then certainly lead to potentially over 13,000 parents either cheering you on or saying don't close or I need this. I think it creates a certain environment that it's best sometimes to make a decision, and at that point, as soon as you make it, get the information out in that regard. We're challenged, but we've been making it. And if the substitutes, having substitutes sign themselves up, we're going to keep doing that. And then what it means is that you might have to have, I mean, I walked in Ms. Wallace's office, she was interviewing subs because, so here's the thing, you don't have to wait for HR to have someone available to interview. What we're saying is make someone available, figure it out. Anybody that wants an interview, sign up. And while we're interviewing them, if you didn't apply and you just signed up because you wanted to interview and learn about Topeka, right at the end of that interview, if we think that you're great, please apply now. And once you apply, we will give you the background check, which is the first piece. And then we do the rest of the other pieces. That's a method we'll continue to use. Did that answer the question, Ms. Bowley?
It does. Sometimes the question and answer seems so simple, but with your expertise, it's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, COVID related? Okay. All right. Next subject.
We, In this section called board retreat, it's really meant for you to pick a date for the retreat. That's the first item. We did upload some documents. We're not going to go through all these slides. We're just going to highlight some items from a couple of the slides that we have. Mrs. Cope has selected the slide she really wants to highlight that is probably of most importance for you. But you received several items. Previously, prior to this board, several months ago, we had NSBA here, and they came and they did a presentation on characteristics of effective boards. So we're going to take that screen off. You've seen the current board has. So the PowerPoint that we do have, do you have our PowerPoint? So the PowerPoint that we do have, which is just 6 or 7 slides that Ms. Cope put together for you. She also gave you documents, I believe, at your tables that you have. Ms. Cope, do they have documents at their tables currently?
We're just uploaded onto Board Docs, so they should be able to access them there.
So if you look at those documents, it's the same thing that's on the spreadsheet. And I don't know that this is the slideshow. So do you have the slideshow that has the 7 or 8 slides, let's see. This would not be the slideshow. She'll want to take this one off. This is one that NSBA came and did for us, but there is a PowerPoint for this evening. Do you have that PowerPoint handy? I believe it's in Board Docs. Ms. Lister, do you all have that? Okay, see, she's nodding. So as Mr. Gowan pulls that up, we're going to start off with a couple of items. The retreat date. And so we generally in the past, it's a June retreat date or July. As we go over some very basic items, just because we have so many new board members, this evening we are going to touch just on a couple of things and then ask for you to read the other documents. Unlike other board meetings, we will be asking for you to go in closed session at the end of this meeting for items that we would still need to discuss. And so that normally will happen at the beginning of the board meeting. But this is intended to give you just some basic information of things to keep in mind. The retreat, if it is a June, if that's of interest outside of tonight, it gives us a chance to talk about not only the strategic plan, but at that time you may have a new school board attorney. It allows them to be there as well. And it allows for some dialogue and conversation about the upcoming year and other things that you feel like over these next few months that came up that just really need to be hashed out in that strategic, in that retreat time. So if it's the board's will, whether it's a Saturday or another date, I would ask that you give us direction on what date you would like. Mr. Munoz, outside of this, if you end up talking with board members and seeing what date, but in the past, it's generally either a Saturday or we have used a board meeting literally and just had a facilitator come in and bring up topics. Sometimes it's challenging to get into some difficult issues when we conduct it in that way because we have highlights and so many other things to address. So sometimes just a morning 8 to 10 or 9 to 11 is helpful. All right, as we jump on into this PowerPoint and we go on to the very next slide of this PowerPoint, the school board norms, these were established by the last school board. So we would like to ask the board at this time, I presume these norms would still be norms that you would like to continue to follow, which is everything from attending the meetings and refraining from making disparaging remarks, avoiding conflicts of interest, and building trust by holding confidential information very tightly. The last board at their retreat came up with these norms. If there are any norms that you feel like are problematic, we would just ask that you identify those and share that with our board president, and he will ask us to adjust the norms accordingly. From tonight, any adjustment of the norms we'll create and bring back to you at the next meeting and just give it to you. We won't be presenting it, but we'll be sharing it with you based on what you share with us tonight. The next slide that we'll share is really, as Mrs. Cope, this is kind of the big one, the complaints and concerns. She'll share that, and then she has another slide that she's just going to point out, and we'll go through a few of those as well.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Good evening, board members. Welcome. So now you're sitting behind, the big desk. And so that means you're going to get phone calls and emails and probably get stopped in the grocery store occasionally or wherever they can find you. I'm sure they will stop to chat. One of the things that can be helpful when engaging in those communications is understanding that
outside of a regularly scheduled board meeting. You are an individual in the community, you're a patron, you're a parent, whatever that may be, but you really don't have any authority outside the 7 of you at a regularly scheduled board meeting. So when people contact you, absolutely listen. Ask clarifying questions, try to get as much information as you can, but try not to make promises or judgments, making statements of, oh, that's terrible, we'll get that taken care of right away. We want to be responsive to people. I completely understand that. But if you can just say, okay, I understand what I'm hearing is this, I will take that to the superintendent, or someone will follow up with you. But just trying not to make promises or judgments. Getting people's contact information, always important, so somebody can follow up, getting names and phone numbers or emails. Remember to refer the individual to the chain of command, since our policy within the district is that we handle matters at the lowest level possible. So if they have a concern about a teacher, question would be, have you spoken to the teacher? Yes, I've spoken to the teacher. Have you spoken to the principal? No, I haven't spoke to the principal yet. Okay, well, I would refer you to the principal. And just kind of remind them of that chain of command. And then I have another document that I can provide you if you wanted more information, that's something that we can certainly provide to you, just to kind of, some helpful hints and those sorts of things.
Now, we're going to answer questions from here because this is a big one in terms of either experiences that you've had, questions you have, or how do you deal with something, or lessons learned. So we're going to stop for a minute and open this up for a little bit of dialogue under the concerns, questions, complaints, or concerns area.
What's on your mind, Mr. Tatum?
Thank you, Mr. President. Not really a question, but maybe a comment, a response to what Mrs. Cope is saying. I would agree with her characterization of the communication best practices. For all of us here, we're in a position of being officials who are associated with the USD 501 school district, while at the same time, we're also elected officials who want to be responsive to our constituency. So I just an observation. I mean, I think that's probably a tough balancing act for every single one of us. And Mrs. Cope, any suggestions or thoughts for how to, I mean, you've already given some, but I mean, with that in mind, I don't know if there's any.
No, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things is if you receive an email, taking the time to say, thank you for your email. I appreciate you reaching out. Please allow me some time to follow up, and either I will get back in touch with you or someone from the district will. And if you then contact Dr. Anderson or someone and they say, yep, we're taking it from there. If you just want to send them an email that says, hey, I've spoken to some district level administration. You should be hearing from someone in the next few days. If you don't, please feel free to reach back out. So just again, acknowledging that you have received it, that you are going to make some outreaches, and then, hand it off to whoever is going to handle it, I think is a great first step, because most of the time people just want to know that they're being heard, or that somebody's trying to do something or will do something.
Right.
So that would be, and same with a phone call. If you could please give me some time to look into this, I will be in touch, someone will be in touch, and then just that follow up. And I think the one other piece that I would caution is, don't overpromise things. If you can't, somebody will get back to you in the next hour, and then we're scrambling, so if you can just kind of say, hey, I'm going to make an outreach, we'll get it back with you as soon as we can. If I get more details, I'll let you know when to expect the call, something like that. But trying not to overpromise can sometimes be helpful to just temper expectations, I would say.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the board to see if any past board, Ms. Boley, having been most recently a retired teacher, you'd be more likely someone that people might just call you just because they all know you. So your reference to how do you respond to constituents, but also follow this piece in the handbooks that are already in place of what we do. Here's what I would share, that because sometimes you don't know that's already in place. And so, when it says lowest level possible, so you wouldn't be the one calling the principal or the teacher or to say, hey, Miss Teacher, I got this call from this parent. You would say, Dr. Anderson, I got this call from the parent, want to make sure to pass this on for someone to look into this thing. That's normally when we talk about chain of command, the question is, did you talk to the teacher? Did you talk to the principal? Well, you may want to start there. And even though you say that and they go back and start there, you might still want to say, I told them to talk to their principal and teacher, but can you make sure this is taken care of? So still connecting with me is helpful to make sure there's follow-up as you're following up with your constituents and letting them know that you've contacted administration. Ms. Boley, did you want to add to how you handle that?
One thing I learned is I don't know what I don't know. And so asking questions, just like asking questions, can we put out a forward email about saying, be ready to do something, and asking Dr. Anderson, so what are the repercussions of that? Because it's not just always that simple. So why put parents on high alert when we may not have to, since we have the people to keep our buildings open to teach our children. And so I have learned to ask my experts for what I don't know. What is the long range of that statement that I might make? So, and I usually always ask, have you talked with the teacher? Have you talked with the building principal? Have you tried to contact the district office? Has it been addressed below me? I am definitely that last resort because I don't know what I don't know. We have a superintendent for a reason, to be our business manager, take care of our district, make those decisions. So that's what whenever I get an email, I always think, well, what do I not know before I think about any type of answer? So that would be my advice.
Thank you, Mrs. Cope, Dr. Anderson, Ms. Boley, great suggestions.
So with that, Ms. Cope is just going to highlight another slide. And again, you have these in your board docs. We don't need to read all of these slides with you, especially since we'll have another retreat. But Ms. Cope, what other slides did you want to highlight?
The only other thing I wanted to touch on just very, very, very briefly, which when coming from an attorney may mean different things to different people, but Kansas Open Meetings Act is something that as a public board of education, you are required to comply with the rules of the Kansas Open Meetings Act. So that means if it is 4 or more of you having an interactive conversation, whether that's verbal, whether that's email, whether that's text message, whether that's, I don't know, do you still do Messenger? Probably not. I don't know. But any interactive communication, letters, carrier pigeons, whatever it may be, if it's interactive, it's 4 or more of you, and you're discussing board business or anything that relates to the board, that's considered a meeting, which means it has to be open. All right. So be very careful. One of the things, social beings, we like people, we like to talk to people. After board meetings, after we've adjourned, as we're, try to be very mindful that if there's 4 of you, you need to be a little bit careful. Now, there may be a play at a school, there may be an event at a school, and 4 or more of you may show up. That's fine. Try not to congregate. And if you do, let's try not to talk about things that you would typically talk about in a board meeting. Talk about the Jayhawks or the Wildcats or the Chiefs or whatever that may be. Hey, nice to see you. How are your kids? Great. Just kind of be mindful. And So that would be, my biggest thing to remind you
We're
of.
going to stop and answer questions with that one. And we will say at the end of the board meetings, Ms. Lister can't leave unless she knows there are less than 4 people left. So sometimes 4 people want to hang around and talk, and that creates the challenge for her leaving. She will have to literally sit and wait. So just at the end of board meetings, sometimes I do my, thing I do at my parents' church, turn off the lights. I used to do that. I don't do that now because you all are new. But with the old board, I would turn off the lights. So come on, let's go. But even in the parking lot, she'll have to stand there at the door and wait. So just be mindful. Again, the 4-person rule.
What I'd also add is that one other useful way that Ms. Lister helps us keep ourselves out of trouble is that whenever we want to share something with the rest of a board, sending it to Ms. Lister and she will send it to you all. And the reason I think is that it's so easy if you were to send it to all of the rest of the board to hit reply all, and now you're getting yourself into trouble. So if you want to share something through Ms. Lister, she would send it to you all in such a way where reply all isn't possible. So.
Yeah, if you receive an email from me or Ms. Lister, oftentimes what you're going to see is this, we're going to blind copy each and every one of you. So you're not able to reply all, and you can only reply to the person who sends it to you. So that's just one method that we use to ensure. And then just one other thing, just being mindful that there's also the Kansas Open Records Act. So information, can be requested. Now, there are, of course, exclusions to that and those sorts of things, but being mindful. I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago, there was some board members that were sending text messages during a board meeting, and that got into the newspaper. So just being mindful about, if you wouldn't want it on the front page of the newspaper or Twitter or Facebook, just maybe not doing it. So, thinking before we respond or how we interact, those aren't necessarily legal things so much as just, I think, good advice. If you ever sit in on one of my presentations to new teachers, I have a whole lot of examples of people doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. So, and then finally, information about students and staff. Again, as a whole board, you are able to receive that information. You're able to discuss those things as a board in executive session. However, you can't just go and request student information or staff information individually. So again, I'm a resource. If I work at the behest of the board, if you have any questions, I'm happy to sit down. There's only 3 of you that are new, so I had to break up the other ones and talk to them separately. But I'm happy to have conversations, sit down, maybe through Zoom, whatever, to have these conversations, because there's a lot of information, and I'm certainly happy to provide you with anything that you need.
With that general information, anything else in here are items that you can just read through. What I would ask is for Mr. Munoz and Ms. Foley, I'll sit with them, and there's a piece of how did the last board communicate with me and contact me in those meetings, and ask generally the president and vice president kind of guide, yes, we still want to do this way. For example, how agendas are created. Currently, we have many of the same things on the agenda at the same time at different points in the year. But there are also times where you may have questions or see a program or are interested in something. Your closing comments, that's when you bring that up, that I'd love to learn more about our school to prison pipeline or whatever, and you share that, and then that becomes then an item that I may put on another agenda, and I'll call the president and vice president in our regular meeting, ask them, the 2-to-1 meeting that I'll have with them. Here's what the agenda looks like. In the past, I meet with each one of you if you'd like to have that once a month. And then I start off with, here's what's coming up on the next agenda. Sometimes a board member will say, yeah, I'd really love to hear about the dual language program. Then I would share, well, let me ask the board president and vice president when they'd like to have that. And I'd encourage them, can you bring that up to all of the other members? Because no one member, someone might say, I want to talk about bicycles. Well, I can't necessarily put that down for all 7 members because you might not all want to do that. So I still will encourage, hey, bring that up to all your board members. And then I will say to the president, here's a topic that I know is of interest to board member X. I'm thinking this is something that we'll put on this date. But that same board member will likely bring it up in this space. So that's just a couple things on communication. And then there's a sheet on there for you to kind of look through. There is a district, Hanover Public Schools, that created a do's and don'ts list for board members. It was really kind of neat. Mr. Robbins and I and Mrs. Coke saw that sheet. We came across a document that the board created for themselves of do's and don'ts. They include things that you wouldn't even normally think of, like do's and don'ts would include blackout days of, hey, here's when you don't visit a school right after we come back from the break. Or because, and here's why, principals are busy, parents have been off, they've been getting phone calls. Do's and don'ts, not having multiple people go visit the same week, but then that means you all have to coordinate. How do you figure out who's going when? So I'll give that do's and don'ts from Hanover to give it, sit down, talk to Mr. Munoz and Ms. Boley and ask them to create the do's and don'ts for this board so that you all have parameters that you all agree on. And then once that sheet is created, the president and vice will say, here's our do's and don'ts as the leadership in that regard. Those are really all the items we wanted to go through. And the last thing that we will remind you of is to pick a date for the retreat between now and end of July.
All right, I'll be in contact with each of you and get a sense of what your schedules look like and when we want to get that together, as well as the board norms and do's and don'ts. So.
It is one day, normally 2 or 3 hours normally. And one of the things we can do, Mr. Munoz, is to send out a Google Doc that says, here are some optional dates. Just mark which one you want. And then wherever the majority falls, then that would allow us to do that just electronically.
That might be helpful.
And if I may, Ms. Lister can coordinate that. Did you see how I just volunteered her? But as board clerk, she's the one with the pulse. She knows, she has her finger on the pulse. So, and is very capable, and that may be easier to coordinate all of you.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson, anything else on your reports?
No, sir, that would be it. Other than Happy School Board Appreciation Week, the reception was for you as well as it was for the outgoing members. I believe that concludes our comments, unless there are any questions that you have for me. I will say for those that are new, when a person has a public address, it feels a little awkward because you can't speak back to them at that moment. But if they are still listening, because they may be new to this as well, I'll give a follow-up and then I'll let the president and vice president know, hey, here's how I followed up. I may even put it in my comment to you. If they're asking a question or something to that nature. And we're so happy that our curriculum department has not only added more cultures, including African-American history and Chinese, just a variety of additional cultures to study. We're excited about that, but we also are very clear in our legislative agenda that we do not support CRT. We do support certainly teaching history and facts within history. So I'll follow up with that individual and then let you all know how that happens. And if I ever send you an email, it will always be a blind copy. So if you reply, you're just replying to me.
Any other questions for Dr. Anderson before we move on? Yes.
Hi. Email. Okay, so when we get an email like addressed to me, it's most likely that all 7 of us got the same email. So how do you, Ms. Cope, Dr. Anderson, just so everyone can hear, so we're all on the same page here, what is the most efficient way of responding to that individual?
Ms. Cope may want to address this as well. I can tell you in the past, the president kind of takes the lead on that, so you don't get 7 different responses. And in the past, Mickelson or Reverend Williams would say, we got this email. Assume that I did not, because normally I don't. And sometimes they just think, snow days, we should be open. They'll send it to you and may not send it to me. And so with that, as the president is informed, hey, I got this email, then he will, or she and vice president will forward it on and share, can you respond? That's what Reverend Williams, Mickelson, and Morrison have done in the past. Do you want to add to that?
Nope, I think you pretty much covered it. I think if you know that you've all received it, kind of looking to the board president as the guide for how the board will respond, or if, usually then the board president will take the lead and thank you for the email. And let him, usually we'll say, I understand the rest of the board has received this, following up all the things I said previously. So, yep.
Yeah, I think it's really up to us. I think it's easiest right now at the beginning. If I will respond directly, if I have a sense that everybody got it, I'll respond and perhaps blind copy you all so that you'll see my response, but you won't necessarily be able. Does that work?
No.
Okay.
Well, no, I would rather we could get into technicalities. Let's not do that. Let's say best practice. If you want to respond and just with the understanding that, I think there's a way that you could let Ms. Lister know that you have responded and she could tell
So then that's
the
what we'll
others.
do. Okay,
And
I'll have
now-
Ms. Lister let them know. that I've
Because you
responded.
can't blind copy all the
Sure.
board members, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and with that, normally the board president lets the superintendent know I'm your one employee, so I received this, can you respond? And now it doesn't mean that the rest of you who got the email, because a lot of times, like I like to let people know that I got it, even if Ms. Wallace is gonna respond, thank you so much. We're looking at, administration will be responding or you'll be getting follow-up. That's always nice to say so that they hear you say that. But you have your system knowing that, okay, there is one person that's going to send a comment back, whether it's the president sending a full comment and asking me to look further into it and address it, or otherwise. Okay.
Good question. Okay, anything else? We move on? All right, well, every meeting will have opportunities to, if you have questions, to, raise them and to let us know. So this is just first of many. Next on our agenda is to do no action, no discussion, board member comments. This is the time to share, just your thoughts or things that you've been up to or things that are upcoming for you that you wanted, or, opportunities to share school functions or things that might be interesting for family or anyone who's listening to know about. So we'll start off with Dr. Bonebrake.
Stay on there. Okay. With the new board, we're kind of starting over, but I think for the past 2 years, we've been blessed and cursed. We have, in my opinion, we've sort of become passive observers as a board. The COVID makes us do the Texas two-step and changing courses every which way. But we have an administration, I don't know when they sleep. I'm not sure they do sleep because they have been so active. You should have seen Dr. Anderson moving these desks around earlier this evening. I mean, it's Brownian motion, to use a scientific term. I don't know how our administration does what they do. But I really think we've got a teacher shortage. We have a lack of teacher pay. We have fallen drastically behind the rest of the world in education. We used to be #1 in math and science, and now we're in the middle pack of the 80 industrialized countries. That's pathetic. I went through last Friday afternoon the state records at over by State History Museum and went back to 1982 when teacher salaries were $12,800 a year. And Carlin got them up to $18,900, I think, by 1987. And that kind of sucked for then, but that wasn't that different than nurses. Nurses were on par until late 80s. And now nurses are probably start out $20,000 more per year. The average college graduate starts out at $55,000 a year. The average teacher, $45,000. That's pathetic. Our greatest natural resource is influenced by our teachers. We ought to be rewarding them. And all the shows we have to try to attract them, if we're not going to pay them, it's kind of difficult to attract new people to the profession. And while it is rewarding, and we have wonderful teachers, but doggone it, let's reward them. And I think as part of that reward, we need to extend the school year. We tried, but we have to get the legislature involved. And I don't know how we do that. But it costs us $1 million a day in 501 to put on a school day. We have $525 million of excess budget in the Kansas Treasury. Why can't we spend a little bit on education? I don't know how we talk with the legislature, but something has to be done. It's sad. I just don't like being sort of passive observers. That's what we're going along. We're becoming a community center. Over the last 30 years, we're providing more and more services for the community. And obviously our education is going down. We say we graduate 95% of our seniors, but we lose half the students between their freshman and senior year. We don't have a good way of following that. We need to know we're losing half our students. Every school district in the county is. And why is that? How can we follow that? Sure, we have 95% of the seniors graduating at start, but what about those freshmen, sophomores, and juniors? I've had my say, shoot me later.
Dr. Schumacher. This is going to be an exciting act to follow every first and third Thursday. So I first wanted to say thank you to everybody who's nervous excitement for my first official board meeting. And I said a little bit, I think when we were talking on the COVID report, because that is my day-to-day, and it is real. And I echo Dr. Bonebrake that it's hard to be proactive when you're reactive. But I think, hopefully over the next 6 months, we can work on ways to be proactive. A lot of people ask me why would I do this? Why would I add on to a busy schedule? And I think it comes down to advocacy for the student. I think advocacy for the teachers, the quality education. But I think more generally advocacy for public education. I talked with Ms. Bawley about this a little bit, but public education is, I think in others' eyes, becoming less and less valuable when it really is probably the most valuable resource that we have. And so that involves all of us, that, the paras that are, hand in hand each day, that afternoon and evening custodians that sanitize the classrooms every night. I think that's what I'm here to advocate for. And so I appreciate the platform and the ability to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Tatum.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to echo Dr. Schumacher's comment about the nervous excitement. I know I've certainly been feeling it for the past several days, and really am absolutely overwhelmed by the outpouring of welcome and just inducting me into the TPS family. It's absolutely fantastic. This is a really wonderful gathering of great folks, and so thank you to everybody who made this possible and who welcomed me into this space along with you. At the same time, I want to also widen the net and give thank you to some folks that have also welcomed me into their own spaces. And I'm talking about a lot of the administrators in the district and other key individuals, principals that allowed me to come and spend time with them in their school buildings and here right here in the Burnett Administrative Center. And so I want to give a shout out to those individuals. A lot of them were just here tonight, which is really cool, and they don't know I'm doing this. But I want to give a shout out to Mrs. Pomeroy, who walked me around Jardine, Dr. Harrington from special education, and both Mrs. Pomeroy and Dr. Harrington were my chaperones for visiting Jardine Elementary. Mrs. Johnson at Meadows, Miss Sharp with the elementary and early childhood education department here. Miss Baxter at Shaner, Dr. Grimes at Avondale Academy, Miss Hoffman at French, Mr. Leffert and Miss Strom at Robinson, Miss Morrissey at Topeka High, Mr. Robbins and Mr. Minky right here in the fiscal department, and also Dr. Dadash at Topeka West. And I also want to give a special shout out to Mr. Williams at McEachran, because while I did not go recently and visit, he, when my youngest daughter, Madison, in the fall, when she started going to McEachran, he gave us a guided tour and walked my wife and my daughter and I around. And that visit with him at that time really became the template for what I look forward to and would hope to see when I'm visiting with the other administrators at the other school buildings. So I really am very appreciative for them carving out some time to meet with me. And I've got a lot more other folks that I'll be meeting with and spending time with over the course of the near future, but definitely wanted to give kudos to all of those individuals. The other thing that I wanted to be sure to mention, just a little bit of an announcement. The Washburn University is having an African American Leadership Day on February 11th. And there will be multicultural student organizations involved. They'll have a keynote speaker. There will be students there. It should be a pretty exciting event, but they asked that folks would spread the word about it. And so I'm doing that and kind of letting our family here at TPS know that event is happening. And that's all I've got.
Mrs. Smith.
I just want to take this opportunity to again thank you to Dr. Morrison, Dr. Mickelson, and Reverend Williams for their service on the board. It's a labor of love. I'm finding out very quickly, and I appreciate everything they've done over the past many years. We have big shoes to fill. They're leaving big holes. And so we will be working to attempt to live up to the reputations that they have left before us. I also just want to take an opportunity to thank all our staff, our teachers, our custodians, our nurses, our paras. It's been a challenging, unprecedented, if you want to use that word again, past few years. And it has really taken a lot of teamwork to accomplish what we have in our school district. Just as Mr. Jones, who spoke and said, he came here specifically because of Dr. Anderson and her reputation. I would love to make Topeka Public Schools a destination for families that provides a quality education and sets our kids up for success. So thank you.
Ms. Stewart Campbell?
All right, so tonight, this is exciting. We approved tonight a mental health intervention grant that was, it's valued at over 600, it was like $630,000, I think. So that's a big deal because now more than ever in my time here on this planet, our humans need mental health services, that's for sure. A future agenda item for our president and our vice president, if sometime in the near future, if we can discuss like the JAG program, I'm thinking of our students with behavior challenges. And I just like to understand more myself, like what schools do we have like self-contained classrooms, and then at what does it take? What are the steps for when a child does go to a program where they're in like a self-contained classroom? I just like to learn more about what TPS is offering for those students. Okay, and finally, all right, well, we know public education is the backbone of democracy, and school board governance, for which we were all elected to do, is a great responsibility and a great honor. And I think we are so lucky to have our new board members. We have a pediatrician on our school board during this still going on pandemic. And not only is Dr. Schumacher a pediatrician, he was voted best in Topeka, or if you did not know that. So he is the best in Topeka, and he's on our school board. And he has 3 children in Topeka Public Schools, and he is a product himself of Topeka Public Schools. So, and then we have Mr. Tatum, who's also an amazing community leader who has 4 children now, right? It's 4 in Topeka Public Schools enrolled in TPS. And he also is a product of Topeka Public Schools. And we have Ms. Schmidt, who used to work for us in communities and schools over at Ross. And she has had 3 children graduate from Topeka Public Schools. She has a junior at Topeka High. And she also graduated from TPS. So there's a lot of love here for our district right here with our new board members and our current board members. And I'm just so excited that you chose to run. And I just know we're going to work really, really well together to continue this important job. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Boley.
Welcome to our board. As you have found, that it's not as simple as it looks like from the outside, as you probably had from some of your training tonight. I also want to thank all of the students and teachers that took the time to give us this wonderful bag. You guys will enjoy all the letters that are in here that students wrote, and for them to take their valuable time to do that. I really look forward to reading them. I just love them. I was going to ask also, put another piece on your plate, I'm sorry. But there's a big discussion in the State Board of Education and legislature about lost students during this pandemic. And I am just wondering if there's a way that we could maybe get a report of what we think has happened for our students and what actions we have put in place to try to find them and help them and assist them. And so if we could have maybe some information on that, I think that would be really wonderful to have that information for us. I heard that there was an opening for the CASA board, the Kansas High School Association for Athletics, and they didn't have a representative in our area. And for some reason I said, well, I guess I'll do that. I'm assuming we should be represented, so I was accepted. And so I am now a new member. I received my acceptance letter tonight, and so I will be representing our area, our region, at that level. Another learning curve I will have to understand. We have exceptional teachers, and we are seeing that every day, even more so, and not all of them get recognized. But we did have one that was recognized, Kathy Murphy at Topeka West, for her educational theater teacher of the year in Region 3. And so every recognition we can give, we have so many teachers that are recognized at a national level and a state level, and we should be so appreciative of that quality that our students are receiving. Mr. Munoz and myself, we attended the Advocacy for Education workshop, and they helped us go to the Capitol building and get in touch with some legislators and to talk to them about being proactive in education. I have decided that I'm going to try to take that more seriously, and I'm going to try to attend committee meetings and get information to share here and other places. And Dr. Bonebrake, I challenge you to join me and be that advocate at the state level, because your voice is needed there. Your appreciation of teachers and their pay and respect, that voice is needed there. So I challenge you to join me up there and be that voice for them. That's a powerful voice. I don't know if all of you got to see the librarian video. What do we do? And they gave us a wonderful video of all the resources they give our students. So thank you, librarians, for sending that out. Luckily, our district is still a very viable place to work. As Dr. Anderson shared before, we received 3 new nurses. We have a nice pool of subs that some of the interviews were just so encouraging. To share one story, one of our recently hired subs entered a classroom, and on the first day, she called down and said, "This is my calling. What can I do to become a teacher and work for you at Topeka Public Schools?" That says a lot about our district. It says a lot about our curriculum, and it says a lot about our students. So every time you can address public education in a positive way and teaching, please do. Thanks.
Well, thank you all. Couple of things. First off, again, we want to send our heartfelt condolences to the families who we've lost at 501. First, Mr. Young, Mr. Alexander Cervantes, as well as Michael Runau. We can't express how sorry we are for the loss to the families, but we do want to make sure that let them know they haven't been forgotten here at 501. I've continued to make my rounds and talking with principals at different schools. Mr. Laffert and Ms. McCoy was yesterday and today, and tomorrow I'll be talking with Mr. Knoll. And and as I have discussing with them over the phone, I'm really interested in figuring out, how are our students doing? What are they dealing with? And what do they need in order to be successful? And so I think overwhelmingly the response has been that mental health has been a tough thing, that the COVID and the hearing COVID for the last 2 years has really affected our students, and being able to be in a mindset that they need to be in order to learn as well as we know that they can has been a struggle for a lot of our teachers and administration. So as we talk about wanting to be proactive, I think it would be great for us to really be curious about what's going on in our district, and of all the 100 things that we could potentially do, what should we be doing in order to help our students be successful, as well as help our teachers, because I am worried as well about our teachers. We see in districts all over, not just our state, but of course the country, schools that have to shut down for a number of different reasons. And I think we all recognize that our teachers are under incredible burden. And so it makes me curious about what can we do? I'm glad to hear that we had 50 to 60 new substitutes. I think that says a lot about individuals who have sort of stepped up and to helped us. And we should do everything we can to sort of commend that, and also continue to be curious about what can we do to help teachers who are going through an incredible time right now. I did recognize it, but I'm glad that Ms. Stewart Campbell highlighted the fact that our board members bring a wealth of experiences, but also so many of us are parents, so we hear so often that parent voices should be heard. And I think it's clear to anyone listening and to seeing us that parents' voices are loud and clear and will be loud voices here on our board. So I think that's important to sort of highlight just once again. Again, congratulations to the Horizon Award winners. All of our teachers, we probably all feel, right, that they all deserve the awards, but we're so happy to see two of our Horizon Award winners highlighting amazing teachers doing amazing things in our class. So congratulations to them. And I think that's it. On the next agenda, we'll be talking about committees. Ms. Boley talked a little bit about the fact that besides us being here as a board as a whole, there are also other committees that will require our attention and our efforts and work. And so that'll be next agenda, but just to be aware of that. Other than that, I think we're looking for one more motion. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. Open to hearing a motion related to executive session.
Mr. President, I move the board recess to executive session to discuss individual employee contracts and performance pursuant to the non-elected personnel exception under the Kansas Open Meetings Act for 15 minutes with no further action to be taken except adjournment. Number one. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any second? I hear Dr. Bowenbrake. Any other discussions? Okay, seeing no discussions, we'll look for a vote. And if I understand it correctly, after the executive session, our meeting will be over.
And the vote is open. Aye, all right. And everyone, please take your box lunch off of the ledge there. We didn't have, usually we have an executive session before and you get your lunch then.
So did that motion pass?
Well, the motion carries and I'm marking it unanimous.
Okay, other than that, I think the meeting is over. Thanks,